joins us from Melbourne for one of our keynote conversations this afternoon, and they're also going to be our MC for tomorrow. We're very excited they could be with us today. A little bit about Arki. Arki is a community leader and international multi-award winning disability, victim survivor, gender equality advocate and activist who's deeply passionate about human rights, disability rights, intersectionality, accessibility, inclusion and non-tokenistic practices. Today, Arki will be speaking to some questions focused on the provocation of this session's title, Centering Intersectionality, Reimagining Disability Advocacy for Our Beautifully Diverse Communities. As awareness grows of the complex lives that people lead, our sector is increasingly challenged to centre intersectionalities in meaningful ways. This means more than inclusion. It means amplifying diverse voices within our communities and ensuring that people with disability feel encouraged, supported and safe. Safe as affirmation, as the last speaker spoke about. So safe to bring all parts of their identity to any space, group or conversation. So how does your work centre intersectionality?
Hi everyone, I'm Arki. My pronouns are they, them. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on beautiful Yoruba land and recognising the land that was and always will be Australian land. Was and always will be Aboriginal land, and how my work centres intersectionality is the fact that I exist. My existence is resistance. The fact that I can be and do all the things that people assume that I can't really highlights that in terms of the fact that I bring my whole self where I go. I don't think any of us want to hide parts of who we are. And as Kata just said, we are whole people and we deserve to feel treated with dignity and respect. So in terms of intersectionality, really recognising that there are so many levels of oppression that one can experience and how challenging it was. And the example that Katajan used about knowing like someone else is more likely to be able to advocate on your behalf because of the colour of their skin is quite, I guess, resonating with me quite significantly. But in terms of intersectionality, it's really about highlighting that we are all complex human beings, but the layers that we put on and the compounding factors of oppression and marginalisation really impact us in so many ways, and there's nuance, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And for example, if I was working at Sydney World Pride as the accessibility manager. Is this working? And they accepted all of me. It wasn't like, oh, you're here because you're queer. It's here because you're queer. You have so many insights as a person of colour, so many insights as someone who's multiply neurodivergent, but also multiply disabled, who's also chronically ill, who's also a survivor, advocate and activist of intimate partner, family and domestic violence. I guess trigger warning through all of this is it's a lot. And I will discuss and share about my experiences and give some, I'd like to call them, Carter started first, fucked up case studies that people can learn from. And for me, it's like, you don't know what you don't know, but when you do know, you then have an obligation to do better. And if you don't, then you're just being ignorant and choosing not to progress further. And everybody's understanding of intersectionality and everybody's understanding of those factors, but I really like to highlight that it's not words, it's not, all of you have the capacity to really change someone's lives. You have the capacity to make us feel like we belong, make us feel that we are deserving, that we can take our space. whether that be with disability, with queerness, as a person of colour from a refugee background, as someone I left home at 15, so I have no family. I don't have an emergency contact. Like, I am on my own, but yet I can still do the things that I can do because of people that care. Y'all give a fuck, and that's great. And I love that. And so it's really recognizing, just as an example, like autistic people are 28 times more likely to consider suicide, 9 times more likely to attempt suicide and die by suicide. You know, that's one aspect of my personality as an autistic person with ADHD, with complex chronic illness and disability. We know that disability rates of suicide are really high. The LGBTIQA community's rates are so high. So you start thinking about, you know, the glass ceiling, but then, like, I'm a person of colour, so there's a bamboo ceiling, and then there's another ceiling, the disability ceiling, and then it just becomes very, very heavy to hold, and very, very heavy to recognise how you can exist in a world that actively breaks you down or doesn't consider you, or considers you as an afterthought. And being intersectional in my work is really highlighting that we are all complex beings. It's not just one thing. And then recognising how these levels of oppression go and compound and become so much more challenging. And it really, I was brought to tears by Kaja when they shared about their experience of, like, someone else being less qualified but advocating on their behalf, because that works, that's the way the world works with racism, for example. And so really highlighting that it's not the same for everyone. If you've met one person with disability, you've met one person with disability. It's not, we can have the exact same disability, but if they aren't a person of colour from a refugee background who's also trans, non-binary, deals with all this other stuff, then obviously our experiences will be so different. And the understanding of that really is so crucial in having genuine intersectional experience, representation. And if we're not in the room, no one, it's like, if we're not there to contribute our experiences and our challenges and our struggles based on all the nuances and parts of our lives, then how do we actively serve the community we're supporting? And I guess the co-design component, and really including and considering all the diversity. The disability community is so diverse, but humans are diverse. So if you think about the disability community, you meet one, like I said, we meet one disabled person, you met one disabled person. It's not this person has this and therefore it must be. An example is like, oh, we're totally wheelchair accessible. And then I get there and it's not wheelchair accessible because they had one wheelchair user who was a manual wheelchair user that managed to do a wheelie to get there. So now they're like, yep, our venue's wheelchair accessible. But it's not that. It's about really acknowledging that there are so many different layers to that, and taking into account the challenges of a situation where sometimes you have to bite your tongue when it comes to certain things. For example, healthcare. The first time I had the courage, enough courage, to tell a doctor that I was non-binary, they said, are you going to therapy for that? That was not like, oh, thanks for telling me. They said, are you sure? Have you got a, like, do you, what? This was a $575 appointment, mind you, with a specialist consultant. I'm like, what? Fuck. I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that. Continue on. It's not your business what I'm doing. But also, it was just mortifying, and how challenging it is. And so I go into hospitals, and even most recently, I've had 3 bladder surgeries, hence my water bottles. And they just could not get my pronouns right. It's just like, and they put a sign on the door, and it was like, use them, something really strange. And it was just like, wow, but you haven't had any training, you haven't considered any of this. But it does impact me, and I shouldn't be the one in hospital trying to advocate to be just referred to appropriately. And then, the question of recognizing that all of our experiences are so different. So centering intersectionality for me is really highlighting that there is diversity, there's significant diversity within the community, but also recognizing that I cannot and I do not speak on behalf of the entire disability community. However, I can do the best that I can to uplift the most marginalised people in the room, and those often are the multi-marginalised communities and people that have multiple identities that overlap and are oppressed. And then you think about, and I brought up the suicide rates because if you think about the fact of the autism component of my life and the fact that I'm chronically ill, and then you add all the other factors of who I am, it's like, well, there's more and more risks, there's more and more likelihood. And even like the American Journal of Public Health, for autistic people, our life expectancy is 35. We don't drop dead. We are dying because we're not included, we're not considered or valued. And so then when you think about a culture, mine, for example, coming from my parents were refugees from the Vietnam War, the word for autism or the word for disability, they're very, very stigmatized words. They're not things that people understand. And so it's not as simple as, it's really about ensuring that you can have an open mind and recognize that we're not statistics, that we are genuine people. And I think it's having that representation and ensuring that all people are represented in terms of an intersectional way is ensuring that as many perspectives as possible have an opportunity to share their experiences, and their lived experiences make so much of a difference. For example, I have worked with some of my colleagues of First Nations people, and they have a lot of sorrow business. And I've read the statistics, I know that, the First Nations community are dying at disproportionate rates. But then when you have colleagues that are going to funeral after funeral after funeral, it's like, wow, this is a lot. This is what their norm is. And then for myself, so in addition to doing advocacy and activism work and lived experience considerations, I have a full-time role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And unfortunately, despite the fact that you would think a DEI role would be inclusive and, diverse and belonging and all that stuff, but it wasn't, because I existed theoretically in statistics until I was in front there where they realized, oh, my actions have an impact on people. I'm not a mythical creature. I exist. And so I think it really brings down to having that representation and making sure that you do have intersectional experiences, because you can read all you want, you can research all you want, but you don't know that experience until you've lived it yourself. And so all of those different levels of oppression and all those different identities regarding being intersectional and being considerate is really about just accepting someone as they are and recognizing that whoever they are, they're perfect just the way they are, and they should be valued and supported. And centering intersectionality and putting an intersectional lens on all the work that is done enables the most inclusion that we can afford the community, ourselves, and also ensuring that if we uplift the most marginalised, then the most people are supported, considered, valued, and so on. So it's really, really crucial to consider that maybe you might not experience something, but if someone is sharing that experience with their lived experience with you, understand that, take that, and also lived experience is a privilege for someone to share something that's traumatic to them or painful. Um, that should be seen as a privilege, not an expectation, in terms of being able to and putting the onus on the community to educate everyone else. Obviously, I'm here, thankfully, I'm here in a paid role, and I'm so grateful for that. And I recognise that privilege, that not everyone has a it's not a stage, but has a microphone to share their experiences. So I guess I take that responsibility of really pushing intersectionality. Pushing intersectionality and making them consider that. And I also take that word for granted because everybody in this room understands it, but it's not actually that common. I was doing some student consultations at the university, and they're like, "What's intersectionality? Like, what does that mean?" And I'm like, "Well, if you're this and this, and then you add it all together, it makes it harder, right?" And they're like, "Oh, I didn't think about it that way." So, like, it can be simplified, but it's just more about raising that awareness and understanding that we are all complex beings, but when you have multiple systems of marginalisation, it does impact you. You have to potentially turn off parts of who you are just to get the support you need, even though you shouldn't have to do that. So just really pushing forward for greater diverse intersectional representation and lived experience. That was a very long answer. I apologise. But
that was great. Thank you.
yes.
Great answer. And I think when we're talking about intersectionality, like a lot of us, we think about how do we service, how do we do disability advocacy in intersectional context, and how do we make sure that everybody coming through our doors is able to get really good representation and advocacy from our advocates. But another thing that we do really well, I think, is systemic advocacy. So campaigning for change. We don't want to be just, putting Band-Aid after Band-Aid on the wound. We want to actually stop that wound from occurring. How do you bring intersectionality into something as complex as systemic change campaigning, where you're often battling, the systems of oppression to try and crack in there? They often are inherently set up not to listen to those intersectional voices. How do you make sure that intersectionality is part of systemic advocacy?
Taking it from the playbook of Khadija. Sorry, say that question again, sorry.
How do you make systemic advocacy intersectional and campaigning for change intersectional?
Committing yourself to it. Committing yourself to have an intersectional lens, committing yourself to recognising that it's not easy, and that lived experience, like I said, is a privilege to be able to share and understand, and it might give you insights you never have thought of or considered, and the navigation of the different forms of levels of oppression is really about, as an advocate or an ally to the community, how are you actively supporting the person, and how are you actively supporting the community and accepting people as they are, with their whole identity, and also understanding why lived experience is so crucial and why intersectional lived experience is so crucial. Because, as again, you don't know what you don't know, but once you do know, why aren't you doing something about it? And giving a fuck really matters. And so, how do we navigate it? Yeah.
Busting for a question, all right.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Bust away.
Thanks. Aki, thanks for sharing your experience. I guess from your words this afternoon, my biggest question is the nature of the systems that we're dealing with and that you would deal with on the daily segregate people based on even the scope of our role and what we're allowed to, what we're funded by to assist people with, doesn't always allow for the understanding and the allowing for intersectionality intersectionality. When we're having those difficult conversations with people and saying, hey, I see all of you, I'm working with all of you, but what's the best way for me as an advocate to work with somebody who is experiencing all of those layers that you deal with, to say, bear with me, because this navigation that I'm going to have to do in the background may sometimes not align with all of you at once, and I might have to separate that. Like, what is the best way for me to understand and have those conversations with somebody who's dealing with such multiple levels?
Transparency, recognizing that you can't hold that on your shoulders. You can't transparency about what you can and can't do because of the systems. Because of the restrictive systems that we are in, the policies, the practices, the procedures. Some of them are so infuriating and long and excruciating and ultimately ableist. Like I my workplace has family violence leave, except to access it, you must communicate with someone, tell them your whole life story, and then they put it on the system. Do you think everyone wants to do that? No. So don't go around promoting your domestic violence leave if that means re-traumatizing people that are going through the experience. So it's very similar. Like, the system needs to be the systems, processes, policies, and procedures that I work on, and I do work from a systemic level as well, in terms of public policy, but it is fucking infuriating. It's like, why does it have to be so hard to get something so simple done and put this person through the ringer so that they can get the support they need? And it happens constantly, and these systems are built in a way that isn't inclusive, is very ableist, very non-inclusive, very binary normally, and doesn't consider the different identities that multiple people have. So it's really, as an advocate, the fact that you can communicate that to your client, to your community, and the fact that you're trying makes the biggest difference, because we all know the systems that exist are not great. NDIS, for example, oh my freaking God, all the admin. What the fuck, people? Like, how expensive is this admin costing just for the client to get what they need? I slept on a couch for 2.5 years with my spinal injury because it took them that long to get their shit sorted. And the money that I spent in the administrative component of it was the price of the fucking bed. Like, what the hell? Like, it's not okay. And it's like, but if you as an advocate go, these are what we're working towards, unfortunately, you know, as an example, the system doesn't have the correct, like, Mr., Mrs., whatever, and I have to put you down as a whatever, Mr., even though that might be not what you, because I need to fill out this form so you can get funding. So if you can acknowledge that to someone, you are at least saying, these systems aren't okay and they're not inclusive, but at least I recognize you, I see you, I value you, and I'm going to take that so that, you know, I will not misgender you, I will value all of you, despite the fact that I have to work in a system that doesn't. Does that help? And I think that means a lot to people. I'm going to use another example. My lovely support worker, Rihanna, here. We went to an event and the parking attendant went, "Ni hao," at me. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I swear to God, if Rihanna wasn't there as a white person to advocate for me, I wouldn't know what to do. It was, racism doesn't feel nice. And this person is like, oh, I'm just being friendly. And I'm like, well, not all Asian people are Chinese, for one. And also, you can just say hello. That's what I said to this person, this older gentleman. And he just went down. I just like, and the offensive, the level of defensiveness that people get when you, I didn't use the racism word. They're just like, I'm not a racist, I'm not this, but also, why isn't ableism up to that level? Why is everyone so defensive when someone says something racist, but they don't do that for ableism. Like it's infuriating, but that's essentially really understanding that there are systems in place that aren't fair. There are so many, and it's so important to really highlight and support and know your privileges and whatever privilege you may have. Even if you're part of the community. Like I said, I have privileges because I have a roof over my head and I have a job. Like, it's not that for everyone, and I feel guilty a lot of the time because I have that, because most of my community don't. And that's why I need to centre intersectionality, because I know how hard it is, and I know how challenging it can be, and I hope that the next generation can and does better than what we're doing right now.
Excellent answer. And I also think that as advocates or as allies, we can do systemic advocacy when we're faced with individuals who are facing those individual, racism, ableism. Like, we can say, instead of saying, as well as saying, I empathise with you about the form, but instead of saying to that person, you can make a complaint to the NDIA about that form, and say, we'll do that for you. Our organisation take on a campaign to change that form, or we'll pass it on to Dana, who are already doing this campaign, or we have a role to link in those individual roles to the broader systemic campaigns.
So passing on the baton to an active ally that really wants to help, and I think ultimately you did sum that up perfectly. The onus shouldn't be on us constantly, because we advocate for ourselves every single day, every moment, just to exist in this world. And so that's ultimately, do be an active ally and take on the mantle so that you can lessen the load of the person that's already dealing with enough as it is.
So the next question was about the word CULT. So culturally and linguistically diverse communities. It's something we fill in a lot in our stats. We tick that box when we're doing our spreadsheets. But you use a different acronym, CARM. Can you tell us a bit about that acronym?
Yep. So culturally and racially marginalised is the acronym, and a lot of that is from my experience. You're culturally and linguistically diverse if you come from Ireland and you have an Irish background, but you are still a white person that benefits from white supremacy and the privileges there. So it's a very conflicting term that doesn't really highlight the experiences of people of colour and the experience of the racial marginalisation. And so I have a friend, a colleague, who has a European last name, and someone was like, "You're a person of color," and like they literally said this, and they're like, "No, I'm white as mayonnaise," and they're like, "No, you are," and it was because you have a it was like. This is a pseudonym, like Madziazzo or something like that. And they're like, "And you have brown hair, you're a person of colour." They're like, "No, I'm still white," very much so. But then technically this person would fit in the culturally linguistically diverse category, but it doesn't capture the racism. It doesn't capture the experiences that we have. And so I use CALM because it really highlights that it's a culturally and racially marginalised. I come into a room and people make assumptions about me. There's a group of Asian people over there, suddenly I'm a part of that group. No, I'm just about, it's all those misconceptions and assumptions that, if you're Anglo, you don't generally have to deal with. And so really, to me, using CALM is more representative of our experiences, and also recognising that acronym doesn't actually encapsulate everyone's experience in terms of the racism and the additional barriers and different identities that intersect. So it makes such a big difference to really highlight that my experience would be very different than someone who comes from, I'm sorry, I'm not hating on Ireland. I love Ireland. Ireland's fantastic. It's a beautiful place.
You've learned how to say it in a really Irish accent too.
Oh. And I actually dropped my ability in the ocean, in the Dublin River, when I tried to take a photo. Anyways, so it lives there for eternity now, at the bottom of the river in Dublin. But I'm just saying, like, it's so different. Like, you can't tell me that I would be treated the same way as someone with Irish heritage. Like, let's be honest. So, but yet, you put us all together in this cold category. It doesn't make sense to me. So I use a different acronym simply because I want to be more clear about who we're referring to. Because I assume all of you, when you use the word cold, you do mean people of colour or people that have those marginalisations and experience racism, specifically systemic racism. So yeah, that just to me makes so much more sense. But I think the biggest challenge is recognising that as the majority, you don't like to be labelled. Like, people have said to me, I don't like, you stop calling me white. And I'm like, but you were a white person. Like, why is that offensive? You call me Asian, you have no issue with that. But yeah, if I label you, it's like the same with like being cisgender and transgender. I'm not cis anything. I'm just a man, or I'm just a this. And I'm like, that's just what, like, it's not an offensive thing. It's just a fact of word, but it's just really recognizing that awareness and understanding so that people aren't getting defensive on, sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
Culturally and racially marginalised. I think that's a great term. I think we should all be,
Yes.
using it. Except that we just changed our spreadsheets this week. We don't want to change our spreadsheets right away, but next time that spreadsheet comes around, we should be talking about culturally and racially marginalised. So we're all in disability advocacy organisations, and thinking about, so we've been thinking about how do we support culturally and racially marginalised people with disability as our the people who come for advocacy. What about our own organisations? How do we make, you're in the diversity and inclusion, how do you make that not a token, or I think you said a theoretical prospect, but make it a real thing in our organisations? How do we make sure that people are really included at every stage?
Hire us, for one, but also, if you have an equal opportunity statement where you work and you want, we highly encourage people from blah, 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 to apply, actually know what to do with that. Like, we actually do seek that out, but also follow through. It is tokenistic if you hire someone and then go, I don't know how to support this person, or I don't know what their access needs are, or this is too impossible. Then why did you put it in? Like, don't encourage us to go somewhere when you're not willing to have us. And that is, so in my 15 years of working, I've had one workplace where I felt that I belonged, and that was Sydney World Pride. And I've worked in 20 workplaces. And that's not fun, moving workplace to workplace, but because of the ableism, the homophobia, the transphobia, the racism, the ageism, and so on, it's hard. And the most, I'm gonna stop swearing, the most screwed up thing is that being disabled is really, really fucking expensive. We have so many additional costs, and the disability tax is ridiculous. And yet we are the least employed community. How the fuck does that make sense? Like, make that make sense to me. Like, It is so frustrating. And then, adding all the other layers and barriers on top, it's like, why? Like, I question my existence in this world all the time, every day. Like, why? Like, and I want to make a difference, I want to contribute, but also, why is the world constantly breaking me down? And once again, like I said, existence is a resistance, and the fact that you all give a fuck really matters. And it has the potential to save lives. And I don't think you realize how much power you have to just really, really see someone as they are and say, you are okay, you are perfect as you are, and you are not an inconvenience. You shouldn't apologize for taking up space. You shouldn't apologize for having access needs. You shouldn't apologize for any of those things because you have every fucking right to be here.
And if anyone hasn't read about disability tax, go and Google it. It's a great concept that really explains a lot. So 2 people on the same wage, or 2 people living near the poverty line, the person with the disability will be below the poverty line, but that won't be seen because their income is the same as the other person's, but their expenses are so much more.
I spend $1,200 a month on my medications alone. And my support worker was going, my different support worker was going to pick up some medication, and they're like, is this just a part of your medication? Isn't there rent for the week, for the month or whatever? And I'm like, oh fuck, I didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a tax.
yeah, it's constant, it's ongoing, and it's exhausting. And it's like, you want us to, you know, I'm gonna simmer down my rage before I go on a rant.
Rage is welcome.
Yes. But yeah, it is challenging that people don't recognize that. And it's so challenging that people, even like in the DEI space, someone was like to me, can't you just take sick leave for that? I'm like, well, if something to me is business as usual, so I get epidurals every 3 months, the same epidurals that pregnant people have to have children, for pain management. And then I said, oh, that's just business as usual for me. I'm not going to take sick leave for that. I want to take sick leave when I'm sick in the hospital, unable to work. And like this person who'd been working at DEI for 20 years was like, that doesn't make sense. You're entitled to sick leave. And I'm like, yes. What? It was just I'm like, how have you made, and it was so frustrating because it's like, to me, it's like a haircut. Do you take leave for a haircut? No, you do what you do outside of your time. But it's so challenging to explain that to someone who doesn't get it. And then I got COVID for the first time ever because of mandated in-office hours. So through the whole pandemic, I was able to avoid it. And then I've had like 7 vaccinations. And I get boosters, and I'm immunocompromised. And the rule was you can't come into the office if you've got COVID. So I worked from home. That made sense to me. And this manager was like, well, that makes no sense. When I had COVID, I couldn't work at all. Like, you definitely didn't work. And I'm like, I have some form of COVID every day. I live with disabling chronic pain. The fact that I'm sitting up here requires ketamine, morphine, diazepam, Parkinson's medication, 2 hot water bottles, morphine patches on both arms, just to sit next to you. So it's the concept and the attitudinal barriers are some of the biggest barriers to change, and that is so frustrating to deal with, because even someone like that who's in the DEI field and feels like, I'm a feminist, I'm this, I'm that, and then they say this to me and I'm just like, why am I having to explain this to you? And it's because I was a theoretical statistic, and then now I'm in front of you and I'm a real human that you actually have to work with, or deal with is a word that they decided to use. It's not okay. Like, I've brought so much to the fucking table, and so many people have said that, but I was incompetent until proven competent. And that is not fucking okay. So you want to hire us, you want to support us, but then you get us in the room and then you treat us like crap.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
Yeah.
yes, it's so
And
not okay.
all those structures of employment and capitalism, they're all built around a white, able-bodied man, so who has, the average of 4 sick days or however many it is a year. So it's about restructuring our whole society to go, well, that's, now we've brought in reproductive leave, now we've brought in all these other leave, let's recognise.
But also don't make that leave so hard to access that you're having to re-traumatize yourself and share your story with some random person in HR. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, make the systems make sense. If you're going to do something, do it as inclusive as possible.
Yeah.
And think about the steps, and have not only an intersectional but an equity lens to what you're doing. And that includes all of your policies and procedures. And I know that sounds really boring and not fun, but it matters. It really does, because if you can set the foundations right and that people recognize that this is from an intersectional, equitable lens, it will have less barriers. If I said, like, no one is going to access domestic violence leave if they have to freaking tell some rando that their whole life story and re-traumatize themselves. So why bother doing it?
Yeah.
Systems.
So you've seen quite a diversity of sectors. Who do you think does this stuff well? Who does inclusion, especially at those higher levels, so, you know, leadership, boards, senior staff, not just getting people in at the intake, you know, levels, but making sure that people can progress, people with disability, people from diverse communities.
Who does it well? I can name everyone who doesn't do it well. Honestly, it's a dime a dozen. It's really hard. It's like, it's so difficult to find people that do it well. I mean, an example, but thankfully I have one example in my brain, the Disability Leadership Institute. So Dear LI, for example, Christina, like, even the word disability and leadership, people don't even consider that as a possibility, let alone an institute that exists to uplift their community members to become leaders, and also the understanding of what leadership is, whether you're leading for yourself and advocating for yourself, that is a form of leadership. It is not a job title necessarily. It's really recognizing that we have potential. But I think growing up, or I guess the society that we live in, we're treated like I said, incompetent until proven competent. So it is so frustrating to be able to do that. So yeah, there are a lot of organisations that are doing it not well. I'm thankful that y'all are doing something great, having this conversation and really highlighting that and recognising that, because it's much harder. I literally got let go from a job that was related to chronic pain while I was in hospital for chronic pain. Literally, I was on my hospital bed and I had an online meeting, and yeah, they terminated my contract because I was in hospital getting treatment for my chronic pain at a chronic pain organisation. So, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So it's that when I saw that question, I'm like, oh fuck, I need an answer. But thankfully there are, and organisations like yourself really recognising that. But
And we worked with DLI last year to do a co-CEO program.
yes, exactly. Yeah. And the first CEO intern is now a CEO somewhere. So like it works, but it's just really that's an anomaly, unfortunately. Let's hope that in the future it's the opposite, and we are hopefully working towards that. But similar to the queer movement, like LGBTIQA plus community, and people are like, oh my god, but you know, everybody's shoving rainbows down my throat, yada yada yada. And it's like, do you realize that it was only like 5 years ago that we were allowed to legally marry? Like, are you joking? It was only 30 years ago, our lifetime, everyone in this room, I don't know, 30 years ago that was homosexuality was taken off the WHO's classification for diseases. Like 30, that's not a long time. Like, and so really acknowledging that we have a long way to go. Yes, we've progressed, but that wasn't that long ago. So we are going to continue to shove rainbows down your throat. And the disability movement is 50 years behind, and it needs to catch up, and we all need to be included and valued. And that's why intersectionality matters, because you can't just go, let's just accept this part of this person and not the rest of them. Because it really, really, it's not possible. I don't take off my disability. I can't change the colour of my skin, my heritage, everything like that. So accept me as I am and work with me as I am. And so not only is that supportive and safe, as Khadija was saying, it's dignity and respect.
Yeah. And what, other than shoving rainbows down the throats, what can organisations do in this space? So what if concerned, so you've got this intersection of refugee migrant background as well as LGBTIQ. What if we're concerned about people's safety here or abroad? What can disability advocates in the room do other than shoving rainbows down the throats? We can do that as well.
Representation, absolutely, but also question wherever you are in your work. If you are in an event or wherever you are, question is this panel diverse? Is there the intersectional approach to this conference? Is this a conference I want to attend, or is this the workplace? And why doesn't our workplace have X, Y, Z? And is it because we haven't considered it, or is it because we don't have the means, or and not understanding that you can access things like job access through and not pay a dime to accommodate to a staff member with disability? Just really highlighting that. But in terms of safety here and abroad, I mean, I wrote campaigns to your local MPs, but you're already doing that. So, just really recognising and understanding the challenges that someone with a visa or challenges with visas is really, really, one, expensive and stressful, but also Australia loves to label us as economic burdens. So, like, we can't even enter the country. Most people with disabilities can't enter Australia on a visa if they have a disability, because Australia deems it an economic burden. So, we're not rage, let the rage go.
One final question before we see if there's any questions out there. If you had to point out one system of power that most impacts your life and the communities you work with and are connected to, what would it be? And what do you want us here to do about it?
One, I'm sorry, not I wrote capitalism, patriarchy, misogyny, bigotry, white supremacy, colonialistic ways of life. Like, honestly, it is all fucked, and it all impacts us, and there's such entrenched systems in our society that we really need to break away from. We need to recognise that they're there, but break away from that. And it's so hard to do when you work in an institute that does that, or you live on a land that's not ceded. It's so it's just so many, and it is so hard to point out a system of power because all of them impact me. All of them I've experienced, and it is hard and it is challenging and it is a lot to carry. It is very heavy, and yet the reason why I do what I do is because I reached a point where I felt safe enough to share my experiences. If I may, my spinal injury is a direct result of intimate partners violence. So every single day, every time I'm in pain, I am reminded that someone who said that they loved me hurt me with no consequences for their actions. Because, growing up with intergenerational trauma from my parents being refugees, dealing with the cultural challenges of growing up with multiple cultures and not being able to live the life that my friends lived was really hard. And the whole assimilate, put your head down, don't make trouble, you should be grateful you got a roof over your head and food on the table, so therefore you have no other problems, was what I was told growing up. And so I was late diagnosed autistic and ADHD, and similar to what Kaja shared, my world changed in so many ways, not for the negative. I embrace it, but I grieve the fact that I didn't get the supports that I deserved when I grew up. I was ignored and not supported because I just happened to have straight A's or do well at school, but a lot of that is because of my Asian heritage. I don't know if anybody knows the joke, A is for average, B is for low average. The expectations for refugee children are really, really high. So we push ourselves beyond our limit constantly because of that, oh my God, my parents sacrificed so much, they did this, this and this. And so that pressure is there. And when I was diagnosed, I was like, why didn't that teacher? I distinctly remember being in the library when I was a child and rocking back and forth and hitting my head against a concrete wall for hours when I was upset. And I'm like, no teacher thought that was different. And I was I didn't know that at the time, but they were meltdowns. I was overstimulated, I was scared, I was upset, but I was also a child, and my parents can't speak English. Who's going to advocate for me but myself? And I didn't have that, and I still don't have that, but at least I now have and found my voice, and the fact that it is powerful and it can create change, but it takes so long to get there. And disability pride is such an important component of that. And the social model of disability, and understanding that we're not disabled by ourselves, but the world that we live in, the world that's not considered us, a world that's not built for us, and a world that actively, you know, actively tries to break us down for not being typical or normal or an inconvenience and so on. So it's really challenging.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and that vulnerability. All right. Did you have anything else you'd like to say? That was such a incredibly powerful presence you brought for us and contribution to our conference. So thank you for coming today. I think we might have run out of time for questions unless anyone has a really burning last minute one. And Aki, of course, will be here all day. Oh no, Uncle Willie.
This is just a rather a comment. When you look at me, what do you see? You see a person, you see a disability. But I don't see that. When I look into a mirror, who do I see? I see myself, an individual person. Now, it must be, I've got a double disadvantage. I've got a disability and I'm also Indigenous. But there are some in our community that have triple disadvantages. They have a disability, they're Aboriginal, and they're intersectional. How does that how do we come to terms with that? And how do we overcome that? And how do we sit down alongside our brothers and sisters?
We celebrate it. We don't see it as a negative. We need to learn that there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with me. I am fine the way that I am. Aside you, Uncle Willie, we've worked on many things together. And it's really about recognizing that you don't need to fix us. We need to live in a world that includes us. And we need to be proud of your heritage, your background, your culture, your disability, the fact that you can, do all those things. You're doing it not in spite of, it's because of. That you generally have that power and recognizing that, and then also uplifting others to recognize the same. But being proud takes practice, especially in a world where we're told not to be, where we're told we're broken, we need to be fixed, we're not capable, or so on and so forth. It is a challenging world to live in, but we also have community, the disability community. We are here for each other in ways that I could have never imagined, and there are people like yourselves that are here in ways that are trying to change the systems, the process, the policies, the procedures, all of the shebangs to change it. But it's not easy, and it can be hard, and I don't want to be all doomy and gloomy, but that's the current reality. The fact that you're here, you're listening, and that you care makes all the difference. The fact that you want to understand that intersectional experience, and having worked with brother boys and sister girls from the LGBTIQA community, from the First Nations community, recognizing that that's a challenge as well, because there may be other stigmas. So there's no word for non-binary in Vietnamese, Japanese, or Cambodian. It's just gay. It's like all they know is gay. It's just like, what? So I'm constantly misgendered. If I am in contact with any of my family, I'm constantly misgendered. I'm constantly this and that. And it's so really challenging to be like, I'm not accepted by, I guess, my own family, but also my entire culture, essentially, because they can't recognize that. I said something to someone recently. Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I'll rattle along. Is that back in the day when unfortunately there was segregation for white people and non-white people, and they had signs, you can use this and you can. And I said to someone, the fact that like say wheelchair users can't enter most buildings. That's segregation. It's happening every single day. Like, you know, there's no sign that says not disabled, you know, like, non-disabled only. But it is a sign because we can't get through the fucking door. So it is segregation everywhere we go. Like the fact that I have a tram in front of my apartment that dings every day, but I can't get on it because there's steps. It's, you know, it's just a constant reminder there. There are always barriers, and that is segregation. The fact that I can't do the same thing as someone else because of my disability, you're segregating me. You're isolating me. Why do you think we have these horrible, you know, statistics of suicide and self-harm and all of that? We are constantly being told we don't belong.
All right, very quickly. Look.
Thoughts on disability loading in workplaces?
Disability loading? What do you mean by that?
So leave that is sectioned off for people that identify with disability in workplaces as a form of leave, and as a form of payment, and a pay rate for people that live with disability and work in the disability space and have lived experience and face an extra load because of it.
So
There was a university, I think in WA, that started paying cultural loading. So for every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, regardless of whether they had extra duties, they pay an 11% loading or something.
okay, so I was actually having this discussion. Someone asked me, when you go to these conferences, do you charge more because you're likely going to be misgendered, be treated, have someone make a racist comment, blah 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 blah, or something, depending on the space, and then how do you make up for that? So disability leave is great if everyone wants to adopt that and recognize that, but it shouldn't be as hard as what I shared when accessing domestic violence leave. It should be as simple as I need that leave and that's it. It's like not questioning First Nations person if they need to do sorry business. That's it, end of story. It's not jumping through hoops. And I completely agree with lived experience being paid extra or more, because not only are they qualified and they have experience, they have insights that someone without lived experience can share, and that makes all the difference for a lot of people in the community. And sometimes I think it's more important than a qualification because of that genuine insight and those experiences that you can't read in a textbook.
I've heard about lived expertise, so it's
Yeah,
recognising
exactly.
the professional benefits of that lived
A
experience.
friend of mine is a psychologist who's chronically ill and disabled, and they have the most clients, and they were told that they need to send off their clients elsewhere, and it's like, no, they come to me because of my lived experience, and that's not recognised. They come to me because they feel safe, that I share that I am an autistic, blah, 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 blah person. And however, when I share it, so if you Google, my life story is, I'm very transparent. If you want to Google, you can read my entire life story. But I'm very transparent about that. And when I was introducing myself into my new role, I highlighted that I'm a proud, disabled, chronically ill, multiply neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, CPTS, all of that, multiply marginalized, culturally, all of that. And the person goes, oh, we wouldn't want people to think you're a diversity hire. And I'm like, no, I'm doing that because I'm role modeling that there's nothing fucking wrong with me.
Yeah.
That I'm proud of who I am, and I want other people to feel safe, because I'm in the role doing a DEI role and I'm leading this, and I can't even feel proud and like safe enough to share who I am, then how the fuck are other people? But yet someone's like, oh no, oh, if perception matters, it might sound like you were just hired because you're a diversity hire, which I never considered until they said that.
Yeah.
I was like, and now it sits in the back of my head and I question it every day, and it's like, no, I want other students and staff to feel safe, that I'm happy to share all these things about me. And this is also why my friend is doing so well and getting all the clients. It's the lived experience,
Yeah.
but it's not considered.
It's value. There's
Yeah.
value and there's professional value in
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for everything, Aki, and thank you very much.